Just showing how uncontrolled they are hitting the dips. Wow. The age-old question, does length really matter? Well, if we're talking about shock length, then yes. Yes, it does. Recently, I installed a rough country 2 to 3 inch lift kit on this 1995 GMC Suburban you see behind me, and it looks great. But I was having a slight issue with the shocks in the front. Basically, when I would hit a bump or a speed bump or something like that, the suspension would rebound so hard and fast that it would actually hit the droop stops on the way back down. This in turn would make my tires, bounce off of the ground. Even on wavy stretches of freeway, where I'm doing 65, 70 miles an hour, I could actually feel the front tires coming off of the ground, and that's not safe at all. So why was this happening? Well, I have a theory, and that is that I was using the 2-inch shock extensions included with the rough country lift kit, as well as the rough country shocks. Now, these front rough country shocks are indeed made for the lift, and therefore were already 2 inches taller than my stock shocks. So using a shock that was already 2 inches longer and a 2-inch extension on the lower control arm meant that these shocks were compressed way too much in the normal ride height to really be that effective. When I took the truck out for its initial drive after the entire lift kit was complete, I could tell that something was different with the front end. It felt a heck of a lot different than before the lift kit with my standard length Bilstein shocks. Now, I really had nothing to compare this to. I had been running Bilsteins for the last couple of years, so that's what I was used to. And so I was wondering if this new feeling of the front suspension was actually better. It did feel a little bit softer. The only problem was I was coming into contact with those droop stops every time on every bump. It sucked. So I ended up doing a little more testing, and what I found was by switching out those rough country shocks with my Bilsteins, the ride quality was incredibly different, incredibly better. And so I can chalk that up to two things. Number one, the Bilsteins are just better shocks, or number two, they're just installed at the correct length because I still have those 2-inch extensions in there. So that's what we're gonna figure out today. Are these included rough country shocks actually really good? Did I just have them installed wrong? I did follow the directions of the lift kit to a T, as well as made several phone calls. And so according to the directions and the people that I talked to on the phone, everything was installed correctly. Of course, my common sense told me, why would a lengthened shock then also need a 2-inch extension? But hey, this was my first lift install, and I was following the directions and what the people were telling me on the phone. No problem, no problem. Simple mistake. Let's take that 2-inch extension out, swap those rough country shocks back in. Hopefully they'll be compressed at a really good level at normal ride height, and hopefully this thing will drive incredibly well. That's my hope anyway. That's the theory that I'm going with. And I thought, man, I have to give these rough country shocks one more go, and that's what we're gonna do today. Looking in the wheel well here, you can see my Bilstein 4600. This thing is only a few years old and doesn't have that many miles, so it functions and performs as new, I would suspect. But you can also tell that this is a stock length shock. These are the shocks I ran before the lift kit. And so the only way these are working now is because I have these 2-inch shock extensions from Rough Country installed. These extensions were obviously included in the kit, meant for running your original shocks. Again, a simple mistake, not that big of a deal. I'm gonna go ahead and take this shock out as well as that extension, and I'm hoping that this ride quality is dramatically improved from what I had before with the Rough Country shocks. I now have the Bilstein 4600 removed, and we can see sitting next to the Rough Country shock just how much shorter it is. Probably about 2 inches. There are now just 2 bolts I need to remove to get this one-piece shock extension out of here. 1 bolt is there and 1 is right there. Okay, so in order to get the shock in place on the bottom, I had to use a couple of 1/2-inch washers. And this is to keep that shock kind of positioned in the center of that bracket. Without that, the shock would float left and right, and we definitely don't want that. I don't want to get into the situation where I'm having to over tighten this bolt in order to pull the two metal tabs closer in. I want to be able to just keep that shock centered and not really affect the position of those metal tabs in case I have to take this all back apart and put the original 2-inch shock extension back in. I'm hoping that that doesn't happen, but if it does, I don't want to deform this too much. With the bottom of that shock in place, I can now begin to compress the shock to get it into position. And it's a little bit difficult to do, but we just got to use some pressure. Shove it into place. There you go. We are completely installed at this point. Both bolts, top and bottom, are completely tight. And you can see we no longer have our 2-inch extension installed. This rough country shock is now fitting much, much better than it was the first time I installed it. It is not over compressed and seems to be in the perfect ride position. Of course, this is full droop. We are on the bump stop with the upper control arm. And with that full droop, we are not overextending the shock, so that's good. I also have to say the angle of the shock seems to be a little bit better without this extension. This extension seemed to push the shock a little bit more of an angle, and so up here at the top I could see that the bushings were a little bit stressed out. But again, without that extension, everything seems to be fitting really good. And that gives me an idea. Right now, I just have this passenger side done. The driver side still has the Bilstein shock. What do you say we take this thing out, hit some bumps and dips, and see if we can tell a difference? Let's do it. So I'm about to hit a dip here coming up, and I really want to see if I can tell a difference between the driver side, which is the Bilstein. That was a little bit of a dip. And the passenger side, which is that rough country. I want to hit this dip pretty much at full speed, like 25 miles an hour, without stopping, you know, no stop signs and stuff like that. So I just want to be able to see if one side soaks up better. And here comes the dip right now, and we'll see what it feels like. 25. Wow. Okay. I'm actually really impressed right now that the rough country side didn't nail that droop stop. That was the problem I was having before. And the rough countries before with the 2-inch shock extensions really felt like there was no dampening happening at all. And that could have been because the shock was already compressed too much in its, you know, normal ride height on the road as I am now. Now with that 2-inch extension gone, the shock is fully extended in its correct, you know, state. And hopefully everything is able to function exactly the way it was designed to do. So we're gonna go back around and we're gonna hit that again and see if we can really tell a difference. I think I could tell a slight difference. It wasn't much, very slight, but I think I could tell a difference. So I'll go ahead and hit this bump one more time, and then I'll give my final impression on what I think is going on here between the two sides of shocks. This is really interesting to me, guys. Here comes the bump. That was interesting. Did not hit the droop stop, which I'm happy about, but I almost want to say that the Bilstein seemed better on that one. We still have both rough country shocks in the back, and in the front passenger, we're running the other rough country, and the front driver, we have the Bilstein. Here we go, guys. We are going to hit this dip hard. Wow. Okay, I have the camera. I'm watching my truck. Here we go. I don't know. It seems to be working just fine. I just hit that big dip probably for like the 6th time. And I have to say, both sides, both shocks do seem like they're doing a really good job. And that's great news, because that's not what I was feeling before with these rough countries. And now it is almost indistinguishable between the Bilstein and the rough country. I couldn't tell you which one is better, and I'm super stoked about that. That means I can take this other Bilstein out of the driver's side, swap the rough country back in, you know, take out that shock extension, and have it exactly the way it was designed by Rough Country. So far so good, and my theory is panning out. Behind me here is the driver's side shock. It is now swapped over to the Rough Country with no more shock extension. I'm now gonna take this out on the road one more time just to confirm that these Rough Country shocks are performing as good or better than the Bilsteins. So here we're gonna hit the dip again. And right now we're doing just under 25 miles an hour. Let's see. Bilsteins are better, have to say. Bilsteins soak that up all day long. And I am hitting the droop stops, although not very hard, and like I was saying, not anywhere near like what I was doing before. But man, I'm a little disappointed. So I wanted to hit a couple of dips here one more time during the day. It's a new day, by the way. I'm just showing how uncontrolled they are hitting the dips. Wow. Here I come. Getting ready to hit the dip. Oh my gosh. That is so uncontrolled. It's crazy. And that's not even a big dip. I really don't get it. The Bilsteins are worlds, galaxies better than this. Unfortunately, that's that. I have to switch the shocks back over again to the Bilsteins. I'm not sad about that. I'm a little irritated that I have to do all the work, but I just want great shocks. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to swap all four of them, even though, like I've told you before, that the rear Bilsteins aren't long enough for full, extension. I think they're about 1.25 inches too short under full extension, but I don't care. If I'm getting to that full extension, it's going to be, first of all, rare, and it's going to be very slow, so it's not like I'm going to destroy the shocks or anything. I think I would rather have a much safer, much improved ride using the Bilsteins than the Rough Country shocks. What I will say is that maybe for some reason on my truck in particular, with this lift in particular, being that it's a torsion bar lift for the front, those torsion bars are cranked, and maybe these shocks just can't handle the extra tension on those bars. That's my very best guess. I'm not a professional with all of this, guys. I'm just learning as I go and hoping that this is profitable for you guys and that somebody out there is liking this content. So anyways, I'm gonna jump in the garage, swap all four of these shocks back to the Bilsteins. We'll hit this same exact dip that I just hit, and we'll see the difference in what that looks like. Here they are, guys. All four of the Rough Country shocks, which will not be going back in my truck at all. And looking underneath the Suburban, you can see I have both rear Bilstein shocks installed. So we're gonna take this out and hit that dip again and see what the difference is. Here we go. On the same dip we hit before, we now have the Bilsteins installed, and I can already tell you, I think it's gonna be worlds different. Here we go. Oh my gosh. All right, Bilstein 4600s, take two. Already, it's phenomenal. Absolutely worlds different. And we got a car coming, okay. Fast, 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 here we go. Worlds, absolutely galaxies different. I'm happy. Well, I started this video being very curious about those Rough Country shocks. I was trying to answer the question, does length of shock matter? And it does, it definitely does. I definitely felt a difference with the Rough Countries before, when I initially installed them, with that 2-inch extension, which should not have been there. And after, when I installed them without the 2-inch extension, there was definitely a difference. But the difference wasn't good enough for my truck. When I would hit a dip or a speed bump, it was still all over the place, just bouncing around, hitting the droop stops, and it was just a terrible ride. I did everything I could to test these Rough Country shocks to the best of my ability, and they just weren't up to the task to settle down the suspension on my 95 Suburban. carbon. They just weren't. You saw me hit a few dips, including the one I did this morning, which was sort of a double dip, and those shocks just weren't having it. Could not control the truck at all. However, there is light at the end of this tunnel. I now have all 4 Bilstein 4600s installed, and I just hit those double dips again, and man, it was worlds different. This is exactly what I thought the first time I installed the Bilsteins in the front, but you know, I don't learn anything. We don't learn anything without doing these sorts of things, without taking the time and testing things out. In summary, does size matter? Well, if we're talking about the length of your shocks, I would say absolutely it matters. Those shocks cannot be too compressed under the normal ride height. It's just not going to allow them to work properly. Now, I would say what matters just as much, if not more, than the length of the shock is the type of shock. For me, these Bilstein shocks, I've never felt anything better. I remember back in the day when I worked in valet, driving Toyota Tacoma pickup trucks, hitting little bumps and dips and wondering why the suspension was so good. I would climb underneath the trucks to find the blue and yellow Bilsteins installed, and from then on, I always wanted the blue and yellow Bilstein 4600s, and I have them on this 95, and they are great. Absolutely fantastic. So on that bombshell, guys, we're gonna close this video out. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the thumbs up if you like this video. I'm Jimmy. This channel is One Road, and I will see you in the next one.